The small diner sat on the corner of a quiet street, tucked between a row of old brick buildings that had seen better days. Its neon sign flickered slightly in the late afternoon, casting a soft red glow across the wet pavement. Rain had been falling steadily for hours, making the streets shine like glass, and most people had taken refuge in the warmth of their homes. Inside, however, the diner was still buzzing with a few regulars, and the smell of fresh coffee mixed with fried food created a comforting sense of familiarity. Lena moved quickly behind the counter, balancing a tray of plates in one hand and wiping the tables with the other. Her apron, once bright white, had faded to a dull gray from years of use, but she didn't mind. She was used to hard work, and she took pride in doing her best no matter how tired she felt. Her shoes were worn, and her fingers sometimes ached from hours of scrubbing and serving, but she never complained. The truth was, life had not been easy for her. She had grown up in a small apartment with her mother, who had fallen ill a few years ago. Money had always been tight, and Lena had learned early that she couldn't rely on anyone else to solve her problems. Every day was a struggle, but she had something that many people lacked, a heart full of kindness. As she carried a plate of eggs and toast to a table near the window, she noticed a small boy sitting alone in the farthest corner of the diner. He was hunched over slightly, his small frame dwarfed by the booth, and his dark hair stuck to his forehead from the rain outside. Lena paused for a moment studying him. Something about the way he sat there made her heart tighten. He wasn't like the usual children she had seen running around with their parents. There was a quiet sadness in his eyes, a kind of loneliness that seemed almost too heavy for someone so young. "Hey there," she said softly as she approached, placing the tray down on a nearby table. "Are you waiting for someone?" The boy looked up at her, his eyes a deep brown, and shook his head. He didn't speak at first, and Lena noticed that he was shivering slightly, probably from the cold rain. She glanced at his clothes. His school uniform was neat and expensive-looking, the kind that suggested a private school, but it didn't match the way he seemed lost and afraid. "Do you want some hot chocolate?" Lena asked, keeping her voice gentle. "It's on the house." The boy's lips twitched into the smallest hint of a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I don't want to bother anyone," he mumbled quietly. "You're not bothering anyone," Lena said firmly, smiling. "You're welcome here. Everyone deserves a warm drink on a rainy day, don't you think?" He hesitated, then nodded slightly. Lena went to the counter, poured the steaming hot chocolate into a small mug, and carried it back to him. She added a tiny swirl of whipped cream on top, just the way she liked to serve it to kids. The boy's eyes lit up a little as he took the mug, and he whispered a quiet, "Thank you." "You're welcome," Lena said. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from him, careful not to crowd him. "So what's your name?" "Evan," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Evan," she repeated, smiling. "That's a nice name. I'm Lena. It's nice to meet you." For a few moments they just sat in silence. The rain tapped against the window, and the soft hum of conversation from the other tables created a gentle background noise. Lena watched him carefully, noticing how he stared at the window as if he were wishing to be somewhere else, somewhere safe. "Do you want to tell me why you're sitting here all alone?" she asked finally. Evan looked down at his mug, twisting the handle nervously. "My driver forgot to pick me up," he said quietly. "I didn't want to go home yet. It's too quiet there." Lena felt her heart ache. She knew what it was like to live in a quiet house, to feel the weight of loneliness pressing down on you. She reached out and gently placed a hand on his arm. "You don't have to stay alone," she said softly. "You can sit here as long as you want. I'll keep you company." Evan blinked, clearly surprised. No one had ever offered him that before. He had always been surrounded by people, sure, but they were adults who were busy with their own lives, or people who only cared about manners and appearances. Lena was different. She wasn't judging him, she wasn't expecting anything from him, and somehow that made him feel safe. "Really?" he asked, looking up at her with wide eyes. "Really," she said, smiling. "I promise. No one will mind." For the next hour, Lena stayed with him. She asked simple questions about school, his favorite subjects, and what he liked to do for fun. Evan answered quietly at first, but slowly he began to open up. He told her about his love for reading and drawing, about how he often felt lonely even when he was at home, and how sometimes he wished for just one person who would understand him. Lena listened carefully, never interrupting, never rushing him. By the time the rain stopped, Evan was smiling. It was a small smile, shy and cautious, but it was real. Lena felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the hot chocolate. She knew that sometimes small acts of kindness, like offering someone company when they feel alone, could make a big difference. As he got up to leave, she packed a small bag with leftover cookies and a sandwich. "Take these with you," she said, "just in case you get hungry." Evan's eyes widened. "I can't take this," he said quickly. "You can," Lena insisted. "Everyone deserves a little treat, especially on a rainy day." He nodded reluctantly, tucking the bag under his arm. "Thank you," he whispered again. "You're welcome," Lena said, watching as he walked out the door, disappearing into the wet streets. She felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. She didn't know who his parents were or why he was alone, but she did know that she had made a small difference in his day, and sometimes that was enough. The next few days, Lena couldn't stop thinking about Evan. She wondered if he had gotten home safely, if he was okay, if he had someone to talk to. Her coworkers noticed her distraction, but she just smiled and shook her head. She didn't explain. Some things were better kept private. She knew that kindness wasn't about recognition. It was about doing what was right, even when no one was watching. A week later, Evan returned. He came in quietly, sitting at the same corner booth, and Lena was there immediately, smiling. She brought him the usual hot chocolate, and this time he didn't hesitate to talk. They laughed a little, shared stories, and slowly a bond began to form. Lena didn't know it yet, but this small friendship would change both of their lives in ways she could never imagine. Even as she served other customers and cleaned tables, she kept glancing at Evan, making sure he felt comfortable and safe. That day, like many days to come, Lena realized that sometimes the greatest reward in life didn't come from money or success. It came from simple human connection, from caring for someone who had no one else. And in that quiet diner on a rainy afternoon, Lena had found a little piece of happiness, not just for Evan, but for herself too. The diner continued to hum with life around them, the rain outside eventually stopping and the streets beginning to dry. But inside, in that small corner, two people who had once felt the weight of loneliness were beginning to feel the warmth of friendship. And for Lena, that was more than enough to keep her going, one day at a time. After that rainy afternoon, Evan began coming to the diner more often. At first, it was just a few times a week, but over the next several weeks, it became part of his routine. Lena noticed the change immediately. Each time he walked through the door, his small, nervous smile had grown a little braver, and the sadness in his eyes seemed to lift just a little. He would sometimes arrive quietly, shake off the rain, and slip into his favorite corner booth. Lena would be ready with a cup of hot chocolate, a warm smile, and sometimes a little extra treat she had tucked away for him. The bond between them started to grow naturally. It wasn't forced, and there were no expectations. Lena never asked about his family, his school, or where he lived. She simply listened when he wanted to talk and shared little bits of her own life in return. She told him about the diner, about how her mother had been sick and how life wasn't always easy. She spoke with honesty, but without burdening him. Evan, in turn, started sharing things he had never told anyone before. Stories about school, about his favorite books, and about the drawings he loved to make. One afternoon, as the sun broke through the clouds, Evan brought a small sketchbook with him. Lena was curious and leaned over to look at the pages. Each page was filled with beautiful, careful drawings, some of animals, some of people, and some of places that seemed like they came straight out of his imagination. She could see the care he had put into every line. "These are amazing," Lena said softly, her eyes wide. "You're really talented." Evan's cheeks flushed. "Thanks," he said quietly. "I like drawing when I'm alone." Lena nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "Sometimes being alone isn't so bad if you have something you love to do," she said. "But it's also okay to share it with someone you trust." And share he did. Over time, Evan began to open up more and more. He started to tell Lena about the little things that worried him, the quiet moments at home when he felt invisible, and the times when he wished he had someone who really understood him. Lena always listened without judgment. She laughed with him at funny stories, offered comfort when he was sad, and celebrated small victories with him, like when he got a good grade or finished a drawing he was proud of. Evan began to look forward to those afternoons at the diner. It was a place where he felt safe, a place where someone cared without expecting anything in return. And Lena began to notice how much she cared for him too. She worried about him when, He didn't show up and felt a pang of sadness whenever he left, but she also felt joy, pure and simple when he smiled or laughed, and that was something money couldn't buy. One chilly Saturday morning, Evan came in with a small frown. Lena noticed immediately that something was wrong. "What's the matter?" she asked gently, placing a steaming mug of hot chocolate in front of him.
"My dad. He's always busy," Evan said, picking at the whipped cream on top. "Sometimes I feel like he doesn't even notice me. And when he does, he's tired or stressed. I don't know how to make him care." Lena's heart ached.
She understood exactly how it felt to want attention from someone who seemed too busy for you. She leaned forward slightly. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes the people we care about most are busy or distracted, but that doesn't mean they don't love us. And sometimes it just takes one small person like you to remind them what really matters." Evan looked at her with wide eyes. "Do you really think so?" "I know so," Lena replied firmly. "And in the meantime, you have me, okay? I'm here whenever you need someone to listen or just be with you." He nodded slowly, and for the first time in a long while he seemed lighter. The weight of loneliness that had been sitting on his small shoulders seemed to lift, if only a little. That afternoon, they spent hours together. Lena helped him with some homework, and in return Evan showed her his new sketches. They laughed at the silly characters he had drawn and marveled at the detail he had put into the more serious ones. As the days passed, their routine became a comforting rhythm. Evan would arrive at the diner, Lena would greet him warmly, and together they would talk, laugh, and share little moments of everyday life. Lena began to notice changes in him. He seemed happier, more confident, and even a little more daring in his speech and actions. He asked questions, made jokes, and even helped other children who came to the diner. Lena felt proud of him, not because he was achieving something extraordinary, but because he was learning to feel seen and cared for. Despite their growing bond, Lena still didn't know much about Evan's life outside the diner. He rarely spoke about his home, and when he did, he was careful to keep details vague. Lena didn't press. She didn't need to know where he lived, who his parents were, or how much money they had. She only cared that he needed someone to care for him, and she was happy to be that person. One rainy afternoon, Evan brought a small package wrapped in brown paper. Lena looked at it curiously. "What's this?" she asked. "It's for you," he said shyly. "I drew it myself." Inside was a small painting, a simple but beautiful depiction of the diner. The rain outside, the warm lights inside, and two figures sitting in a corner booth, one tall and one small, were captured in soft, careful strokes. Lena felt tears prick at her eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered, holding it close. "I'll treasure this forever." Evan smiled, a real, happy smile this time. "I wanted you to know. Thank you. For everything." "You don't have to thank me," Lena said softly. "I do this because I care about you." That evening, Lena sat behind the counter after closing, thinking about the strange, wonderful connection that had grown between her and the little boy. She knew that life was unpredictable, and that sometimes moments like these were rare and fleeting. But she also knew that the small acts of kindness, the hot chocolate, the cookies, the listening, were making a real difference in Evan's life. And in turn, it was changing hers. Meanwhile, outside the diner, Evan's absence at home did not go unnoticed. His father, a busy man with endless responsibilities, had begun to wonder where his son kept disappearing after school. At first, he assumed it was with friends or tutors, but when he asked Evan, the boy often gave vague answers or shrugged. The father, though wealthy and powerful, had been distant, more focused on business deals and social obligations than on the quiet needs of a child. Little did Lena know, the simple moments she shared with Evan were being watched in a way she couldn't imagine. While she believed that their friendship was private and small, it was quietly beginning to ripple outward, touching lives beyond what she could see. Weeks passed, and the bond between Lena and Evan continued to grow. She helped him navigate small challenges at school like group projects and math problems he didn't understand. She encouraged him to pursue his interests, whether it was drawing, reading, or simply exploring the world around him. She never treated him like a burden or a responsibility. To her, he was just a child who needed warmth and understanding, and she gave it freely. Evan, in turn, began to trust her completely. He laughed more openly, spoke more freely, and sometimes, when no one else was watching, he even hugged her. Lena felt the weight of her own struggles ease just a little whenever he was around. His presence reminded her why kindness mattered, why human connection could make even the darkest days feel lighter. One day, as Evan left the diner, he turned back to her with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said quietly, "you make everything feel okay. Even when things are bad at home, I feel happy here." Lena smiled, her heart swelling. "That's because you deserve to feel happy, Evan, and I'm glad I can help." He nodded and ran off into the streets, his small frame disappearing into the evening light. Lena watched him go, feeling a mix of pride, love, and hope. She didn't know what the future held for either of them, but she did know one thing. Their friendship, built on simple acts of kindness and understanding, was something precious, something rare, something that could change lives in ways no one could have predicted. And so, day by day, rain or shine, Lena continued to serve her customers with a smile, always keeping an eye on Evan. Their connection was quiet, small, and unassuming, but it was real. And in the quiet moments between serving plates and pouring coffee, Lena found herself discovering a kind of joy she hadn't known before, the joy of making a difference in someone's life simply by being kind, present, and human. As the weeks went by, Evan's visits to the diner became more frequent, and Lena began to notice subtle changes in him. He seemed more confident, more willing to speak up, and there was a spark in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Even though he was still a quiet child at heart, the loneliness that had weighed heavily on him was slowly lifting, replaced by the comfort and warmth of someone who truly cared. Lena found herself smiling more often, her heart lighter, even in the middle of her long, tiring shifts. It was during one of those ordinary days that things began to change. Lena had just finished wiping down the tables after a busy lunch rush when a black car pulled up outside the diner. The windows were tinted so darkly that she couldn't see who was inside. She went back to clearing plates, thinking nothing of it, until she noticed a man in a suit stepping through the door. He moved with a quiet confidence, yet there was something gentle in the way he looked around. He approached the counter and asked in a calm voice, "Is Evan here?" Lena froze for a moment. She had never seen this man before, and she wasn't sure what to say. "Yes," she replied carefully. "He's sitting in the corner booth." The man nodded and walked toward Evan, who looked up, startled. "Hi, Evan," the man said softly. "I'm your father." Evan's eyes widened. He had mentioned his father in passing, but he had never really talked about him in detail. The man knelt down to his son's level, but Evan seemed unsure, shrinking slightly in his seat. Lena watched silently from a distance, unsure how to react. "I've been worried about you," the father continued. "I didn't realize you've been spending so much time here." Evan looked at Lena, then back at his father. "I like it here," he said softly. "Lena listens to me. She cares." The father's expression softened, and he glanced at Lena with a mix of curiosity and gratitude. He had expected to find a child merely passing the time, but instead he found his son smiling, relaxed, and engaged in conversation. Something about the scene struck him deeply. He realized that his son had found in Lena a kind of warmth and understanding that money and luxury could never buy. For a moment, the diner was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of cars passing outside. Lena felt a mixture of pride and nervousness. She had never expected to meet Evan's father, let alone someone who seemed so powerful, so important. Yet, in that moment, it didn't matter who he was. All that mattered was that Evan had someone, in his life who cared for him, and that Lena had been part of that. Over the next few days, the father began to observe more carefully. He didn't reveal his identity fully at first. Instead, he would arrive quietly, sometimes sitting at a corner table, watching Lena interact with Evan. He noticed how patient she was, how she encouraged him, and how her kindness seemed effortless. She never treated him like a problem or a burden. She simply treated him like a child who deserved to be seen and heard. One afternoon, while Lena was helping Evan with a drawing, the father decided to approach her more directly, though still without revealing who he was. He ordered a meal at the counter and waited, watching as she carried a plate to his table. Lena smiled at him warmly, offering the same friendly courtesy she gave all her customers. She had no idea who he was, and he didn't interrupt the flow of their conversation. "I like the way you care for him," the man said quietly, once Evan had left the table for a moment. "Not many people would take the time the way you do." Lena paused, slightly startled. "Oh, thank you," she said softly. I know what it's like to feel alone." "I want him to know he's not." The man nodded, a gentle smile on his face. He could see the truth in her words. She wasn't saying it to impress him or to gain anything. She truly meant it. And in that moment, he felt a pang of regret for how little attention he had given his own son. Days turned into weeks, and Lena continued to care for Evan as always. Unaware that his father was quietly watching and learning from her example, she helped him with schoolwork, listened to his stories, and encouraged his artistic talents. She never asked about his family, his wealth, or his home life, and she never treated him differently because of what she might have guessed about him. To her, he was simply a child in need of kindness. Evan, meanwhile, began to flourish in ways his father hadn't anticipated. He laughed more freely, expressed himself more openly, and even began sharing his interests with other children who visited the diner. Lena's presence gave him the confidence to step outside of his shell, and the father began to see the value of small, human connections over material wealth. One rainy evening, the father decided it was time to speak to Lena more directly. He entered the diner quietly and approached her as she was cleaning up the counter. "I need to talk to you," he said gently. Lena looked up, startled but curious. "About what?" she asked. "About Evan," he replied. "I want to thank you for what you've done for him." Lena blinked, a little confused. I didn't do anything special," she said. "I just tried to be there for him." "That's exactly it," he said, his voice soft. "You've given him something that I, despite everything, could not. You've given him attention, warmth, and understanding. You've made him feel safe and seen, and for that I am grateful." Lena felt a flush of surprise and emotion. She had never expected recognition, and yet hearing these words made her feel valued in a way she hadn't experienced before. "I just wanted him to know someone cared," she said softly. "And he does," the father said with a smile. "Thanks to you, he knows that every day." From that day on, Lena's role in Evan's life became even more important. The father began to quietly involve her in his son's routine, sometimes checking in to see if she was available to watch over him or help with small tasks. She remained humble, never seeking recognition or reward, and her genuine care only strengthened the bond she had with Evan. Evan noticed the subtle changes, too. He began to talk about his father more openly, sharing stories of their time together when it happened, and he often mentioned Lena in his conversations. To him, she was not just a friend or a helper. She was someone who had opened a new world of kindness and attention that he had never truly known before. As the seasons changed and the weather grew warmer, Lena and Evan continued their routine. They spent afternoons together, drawing, reading, and talking about everything and nothing at all. Their friendship was simple but profound, built on trust and care, and in the quiet corners of that small diner, something extraordinary was happening. A little boy was learning to feel valued and loved, and a young woman was discovering the powerful impact of her own kindness. Lena still didn't know the full truth about Evan's life, and she didn't need to. The father's presence was discreet, almost invisible, allowing her to continue her work without pressure or expectation. Yet he had already begun to see how deeply her actions were affecting his son. He realized that no amount of money, no grand gesture, and no luxurious lifestyle could replace the simple, heartfelt connection that Lena offered. One evening, As the diner was quiet and the last few customers had left, Lena sat with Evan, helping him finish a drawing he had been working on for days. She noticed how focused he was, how the small details in his work reflected his growing confidence. "You're getting really good at this," she said softly. "I'm proud of you." Evan looked up, a shy smile on his face. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said quietly. "You make me feel like I can do anything." Lena felt a lump in her throat. "No, Evan," she said gently. "You've always had the talent. I just helped you see it." The father, standing a little distance away, watched this exchange quietly. He felt a deep respect and admiration for Lena. In her simple, consistent kindness, she had done something extraordinary. She had given his son something far more valuable than anything money could buy: a sense of worth, belonging, and love. And in that quiet moment, Lena, Evan, and his father all felt the beginnings of a bond that would change their lives forever. One small act of kindness, one corner booth in a rainy diner, and the willingness to care had begun to weave a story none of them would ever forget. The days passed quietly, but Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Evan continued to visit the diner, smiling more often and laughing freely, yet there was a small hint of tension in the air. She had noticed him glancing toward the door more frequently, as if expecting someone. At first, she thought it was just the boy's imagination, but then she realized that Evan had been keeping something from her. One afternoon, as Lena was wiping down a table, she saw a sleek black car pull up outside. The rain had returned, a light drizzle tapping on the windows, and the diner's neon sign reflected softly on the wet pavement. A man in a suit stepped out of the car, and for a moment Lena's heart skipped a beat. There was something about him, calm, confident yet gentle, that made her instinctively sense that he was important. She watched silently as he walked inside, pausing near the counter. "Lena?" he said, his voice soft but firm. She froze. "Yes?" she replied cautiously, unsure who this man was. "My name is Mr. Grayson," he said, and Lena realized immediately that this must be Evan's father. She had heard Evan speak of his father in passing, but she had never met him. She had no idea he was this commanding, this calm, and yet there was a warmth in his eyes. I know you take care of my son," he continued. "And I want to thank you." Lena blinked, taken aback. She had never expected recognition or reward. I just wanted him to feel safe," she said softly. "I didn't do anything special." "You did more than you realize," he said gently. "You've given him something I could not. You've given him attention, care, and understanding. You've made him feel like he matters. That is priceless." Lena felt a lump in her throat. She wasn't used to hearing praise, especially from someone she didn't know. I'm just happy he's happier now," she said quietly. The man nodded, a small smile on his face. "That is enough for me," he said. "But I want you to know that I see you and I understand what you've done for him." Lena swallowed hard. She wasn't sure what to say. She had never imagined that her simple acts of kindness, offering hot chocolate, sharing cookies, listening, would reach beyond the little boy and touch the man who had such influence over his life. Just then, Evan walked in, dripping wet from the rain. He ran toward the booth, and Lena quickly handed him a towel to dry his hair and coat. "You're soaking," she said gently. "Sit down before you catch a cold." Evan nodded, and for a moment he looked nervous as he glanced at his father. Lena could sense the boy's hesitation. He had been spending these afternoons with her freely, without worry or expectation, and now his father was here watching, observing. "I want you to know," Mr. Grayson said, kneeling to Evan's level, "that I am proud of you. And I want to thank the person who helped you feel safe and happy. Lena, thank you for everything you've done for my son." Evan looked at Lena, then back at his father, and his small face lit up with a shy, hopeful smile. She's the best," he said softly. "She's the only one who really listens to me." Lena felt her cheeks flush, her heart beating quickly. She had never expected this, never imagined that her efforts would be recognized in this way. She looked at Evan, then at his father, and a quiet sense of pride and relief washed over her. Over the next few days, Mr. Grayson began to visit the diner more often, sometimes staying quietly in a corner, observing the interactions between Lena and his son. He didn't interfere or interrupt, but he watched closely, learning from the way she connected with Evan. He noticed the patience in her voice, the gentle encouragement in her gestures, and the way she treated him like a real person rather than a wealthy child. Evan seemed happier than ever. He laughed freely, shared stories without hesitation, and even began helping other children who visited the diner. Lena's presence had given him confidence, and the father could see the transformation happening before his eyes. It was subtle but powerful, and it touched him deeply. One evening after the diner had closed, Mr. Grayson asked Lena to step outside with him. The rain had stopped and the streets were quiet, the soft glow of streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement. "I want to offer you something," he said, his voice calm and sincere. Lena looked at him, curious but cautious. "Offer me what?" she asked. "A position," he said. "I want you to manage the cafe in one of my hotels. You'll have a proper salary, benefits, and accommodation. If you need it. You'll be in charge, not just a server, and I want you to continue the work you've been doing with Evan and other children who might need someone like you." Lena's eyes widened. She was speechless. She had never imagined such an opportunity, never dreamed that her small acts of kindness would lead to anything like this. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything right now," he replied gently. "Just think about it. I want to make sure you're comfortable and happy, not pressured." Evan, who had followed her outside, ran up and hugged her. "See?" he said with a grin. "I told my dad you were amazing." Lena laughed softly, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She hugged Evan back, feeling the warmth and trust in his embrace. "You've got a lot of courage, you know that?" she said gently. Evan beamed. "I learned from you." As they stood there under the quiet glow of the streetlights, Lena felt a mixture of awe, gratitude, and disbelief. She had started as a simple waitress, trying to make a small difference in a lonely child's life. She had no idea that her kindness would lead to recognition, opportunity, and the beginning of a new chapter in her life. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Lena continued her work at the diner, but she also began to consider the offer from Mr. Grayson seriously. She realized that this opportunity could change her life and her mother's life, giving them stability and security they had never known. And yet she worried about leaving the diner behind, the place where she had built this connection with Evan. Evan noticed her hesitation. "You should go," he said one afternoon, looking at her with sincere eyes. "You've helped me so much. You deserve this too." Lena felt a lump in her throat. "I don't want to leave you," she admitted softly. "You're not leaving me," he said with a confident nod. "You're just helping more people now, and I'll visit." His words warmed her heart. She realized that moving forward didn't mean abandoning the past. It meant expanding the good she had already begun. She could continue to care for Evan, even in a new place, and she could help other children who needed the same kindness she had given him. Finally, Lena accepted the offer. She was nervous at first, stepping into a new world of luxury, responsibility, and opportunity, but she never lost her humility, her warmth, or her genuine care for people. The cafe flourished under her guidance, and she continued to nurture Evan, who visited often, laughing and learning and growing more confident with each passing day. Through it all, Lena never forgot the small diner, the rainy afternoons, and the first cup of hot chocolate that had started it all. She realized that one simple act of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. And she knew that no matter what, she had made a real difference in a little boy's life, and that was worth more than anything else. Evan's father, Mr. Grayson, watched quietly as the bond between Lena and his son continued to grow. He had learned something important himself, that wealth and power were not the most valuable things in life. True value lay in human connection, in kindness, and in the willingness to care for someone with an open heart. Lena had reminded him of that, and for that, he was deeply grateful. And so life began to change in small but meaningful ways. Lena's hard work, compassion, and generosity had opened doors she had never imagined. Evan had found a safe, caring presence in his life. And Mr. Grayson, the wealthy and busy father, had discovered that sometimes the most important lessons come not from business or money, but from watching a simple act of love unfold in a quiet corner of a small diner. Months had passed since Lena had accepted the offer to manage the cafe in Mr. Grayson's hotel. Life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. The cafe was busy and beautiful, filled with the warm scent of freshly brewed coffee, baked goods, and the hum of happy customers. Lena worked hard every day, making sure everything ran smoothly, but she never lost the warmth and kindness that had drawn Evan to her in the first place. Her staff admired her not just for her skill and dedication, but for the way she treated everyone with respect and care. Her mother's health had improved, thanks to better medical care that Lena could finally afford. She could provide for her mother in ways she never could before, giving her comfort, stability, and peace of mind. The weight of constant worry had lifted, replaced with a sense of security and hope. Yet despite the changes, Lena had remained humble and grounded. She remembered the rainy afternoons in the little diner, the first shy smiles from Evan, and the simple joys of offering someone kindness without expecting anything in return. Evan continued to visit frequently, often accompanied by his father, who had learned to make more time for his son. The small boy had grown in confidence and happiness. His once shy and lonely demeanor had transformed into a bright, curious, and joyful personality. He laughed freely, shared his thoughts openly, and even helped other children who came into the cafe, encouraging them with the same gentle kindness Lena had shown him. One afternoon, as the sun streamed through the cafe windows, Evan approached Lena with a shy smile. "I made something for you," he said, holding out a small box wrapped in colorful paper. Lena took it carefully, her curiosity piqued. Inside was a handmade scrapbook filled with drawings, notes, and little memories of the time they had spent together. There were sketches of the cafe, the two of them sitting at the corner booth, rainy streets outside, and even little illustrations of cookies and hot chocolate. Lena's eyes welled up with tears. "Evan, this is beautiful," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'll treasure this forever." "I wanted you to know," Evan said softly, "that you're the reason I feel happy now. You made me feel like I matter, like someone really cares." Lena pulled him into a hug, holding him close. "You've always mattered, Evan," she said gently. "I just helped you see it for yourself." Mr. Grayson, standing nearby, watched the interaction quietly. He felt a deep sense of gratitude and admiration for Lena. She had done more than he could have imagined. She had nurtured his son's confidence, happiness, and emotional well-being in ways he had been too busy to provide. He realized that her influence had gone beyond just helping Evan. She had touched their whole family, teaching them the value of care, attention, and genuine human connection. Life at the cafe flourished. Lena implemented new programs for children, giving them a space to draw, read, and spend time in a safe, caring environment. Families began visiting not just for the food and drinks, but for the warmth and kindness that permeated the cafe. Lena's reputation grew not for her wealth or status, but for the genuine care she showed to everyone around her. Despite her busy schedule, Lena always made time for Evan. They would spend hours drawing, talking, and exploring the city together. She encouraged him to pursue his passions, whether it was art, reading, or simply spending time outdoors. Evan blossomed under her guidance, gaining confidence, empathy, and a sense of security that he had never known before. Mr. Grayson, too, had changed. He had learned to slow down, to notice the small moments that mattered, and to spend time with his son in meaningful ways. He observed how Evan had grown under Lena's care, and he realized that true happiness did not come from wealth or possessions, but from human connection and love. He began to participate more in his son's life, attending school events, sharing stories, and simply being present one evening. As the cafe closed and the last customers left, Lena sat with Evan and his father, sipping warm drinks and reflecting on how far they had all come. "I never imagined my life could be like this," Lena said softly, looking around the cozy cafe. "I just wanted to help one little boy feel safe and happy. I never thought it would lead to all this." Mr. Grayson smiled gently. "You've changed more than just Evan's life, Lena. You've changed mine too. You've reminded me what really matters." Evan leaned against Lena, his small hand holding hers. "You made my world brighter," he said quietly. "I don't feel lonely anymore." Tears welled up in Lena's eyes, but she smiled through them. "And you've made mine brighter too," she replied softly. As the months turned into years, Lena's influence continued to ripple outward. Children who came to the cafe learned the same lessons of kindness, empathy, and care that she had shown Evan. Families grew closer, and the community felt warmer and more connected. Lena never sought recognition or reward. Her satisfaction came from seeing the smiles, laughter, and confidence of the children she helped. Evan grew into a confident, kind, and thoughtful young boy, carrying the lessons Lena had taught him into every aspect of his life. He excelled in school, explored his creative talents, and most importantly, learned to value relationships, kindness, and compassion above material wealth. Lena had given him more than guidance. She had given him a foundation for life, one built on love, care, and understanding. Mr. Grayson watched this transformation with pride and gratitude. He knew that Lena's presence had not only helped Evan, but had also transformed him as a father. He learned to balance work with family, to slow down and appreciate the small joys in life, and to recognize that wealth and power were meaningless without meaningful connections. One sunny afternoon, as Lena prepared a tray of pastries for the children who had come to the cafe after school, Evan ran up to